Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, I have a special guest, Charles Loretto from Cain Watters Associates, joining me on the show. I know that financial planning can be a bit of an undertaking for all of us, so Charles is here to break it down. From where you should start to market trends and best pieces of advice, there's a lot to learn. Pull out your notebooks and let's get into it. Hey Docs, let's talk about SmileSuite because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud SmileSuite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. SmileSuite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at getsmilesuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with SmileSuite because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. Charles, I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs with me. It's been a while. I've been waiting to have you on the show. So if you wouldn't mind, would you just talk to us a little bit about yourself, Cain Watters and Associates, and just how you got into our industry?
Yeah, so it's been a great ride. 3 years ago that I entered this space, knew nothing about dentistry, financial planning, taxes, certainly nothing about orthodontics. And so I got my break and started working here with Daryl Cain, the Cain and Cain Watters. And he knew me personally. He was actually doing my tax returns and looking and showing me I had a negative net worth and wasn't saving enough. And but we had a relationship, good, nice little bond. And he basically onboarded me and said, "Dude, you need to come work for me." Started just as an employee, and now fast forward 20 plus years, and one of the owner partners in the group here founded a company called NDP, a transition department, and that works actually with Cain Watters hand in hand. And a lot of knowledge. I've actually lectured at over 55 dental schools all across the country,
Wow.
Residency programs, orthodontics all across. I'll be speaking at the AAO this year. Pretty much every dental meeting, state, national meeting, I have had a voice in lecturing, and I've got lots of different topics that I speak on. My newest lecture is how to have a 3-day work week. And surprisingly, that is catchy. It has 300 plus people signed up for my courses at the Hinman General Dentist meeting that's coming up. But yeah, I've been in the space a long time. And Cain Watters is this big, giant CPA firm. We're in Dallas. We only work with dentists. But what's unique about it, and I think what's appropriate for me being on your show today, is just our knowledge and experience in orthodontics. We do work with about 700 orthodontic practices and a lot of very successful practices. I would say we're pretty well known in the space. I'm not going to just say it's a given that everybody knows about us in the orthodontic space, but I would say the vast majority of established orthodontists at this point at least know the name and brand Cain Watters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say, having known you for quite a while now, and it is such a blessing, I know, to so many of my clients that are using you or have gotten to the point where they can use you. It's always fun when we go from being our baby practices to when they graduate to the point where it's like, all right, now it's really time to start thinking about wealth management and what I'm doing and what my future looks like, when they've made it past those first years of, I just gotta make my name, make a name for myself.
Yeah.
So when I know that we have talked many times over the years, and I know one of the things that we talk a lot about is just your passion in the orthodontic space. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just talking about that a little bit so the audience can, hear a little bit about that.
I'm going to tell you about that passion, but first I'm going to tell you the story about when we met and what I saw is the passion you have.
Oh.
So for our listeners, we're exhibiting. And I'm telling you, it's a little bit of a pain to be the exhibitor. You just stand there and you wait for somebody to come up. And you guys are all trained in dental school not to look at the exhibitor because they may get eye contact. And who knows, they're going to start talking to me. I don't want to talk to them. And they're going to sell me something. Okay, you guys are all trained. We know all this. So anyway, I'm sitting at AAO. And right across from me is this Jill Allen Associates. I don't know who Jill is. I'm seeing this these girls over there. But holy smokes, I'm just sitting there and there's got to be 30, 40 people, and every single person comes up. They're all young and they're all just hugging. And it's not just the bro hug, like a side hug. It's how, you know how we do it, Joe. The guys do the bro hug, like, what up, bro? And do a little thing, and they do the little side. This is like the full embrace. Mother has not seen their child hug. Who is this chick? What is she doing? And I can tell she had a deep relationship and she cared about these people. And so about the second or third day goes by, I'm like, okay, I can see what you do. I just don't know you. Give me a little sales pitch. And so I got to know you from there. And that's many moons ago. And I've sent many people to you. And you do a wonderful job. I can tell you're super passionate about helping young people and to get off their start. I know that you've transitioned that space into more consulting and even to some of our established doctors. But I think we have something in common, and it's passion of helping people.
Yes.
And I'm the same way, Jill. When people come to me, they're a dentist, they're an owner, or they're going to be an owner. If they're not an owner, I'm going to motivate them and try to help them with their why. I've lectured this kind of why speech throughout my career, and I'm passionate about teaching young people about the reasons to be an owner. And for orthodontics, I would say probably 10 years ago that I got a little anxiety if I ever told somebody to start a practice from scratch because of the uphill battle from the amount they would borrow, the amount of lease they would sign. But it's become more and more, I think, just prevalent today than it was, I would say, in the past. This is almost has to be a solution if there's nothing available for them to purchase. But going back to my why is I think there's a reason you own a business. Number one, you will make more money. Number two, you'll build equity in that business. And we'll talk about the equity both on the valuation side to private business and private equity later. But there is tax planning, which I'm obviously very passionate about. Being a business owner, you get to run these things through the business, the ability to start saving and pension planning at an optimal level so you can obviously prepare for retirement. And you're just in charge of your own business. You get to control your outcome, hire, fire, use the supplies, the lab, whatever you want to use. Get to the 3-day work week if that's what you choose. Passionate man. I'm full of passion about anything to do with owning a business, full of passion about once you own the business, how to look at it differently, how to sometimes get these second opinions about it, and really to push yourself as an owner and to push yourself on what you should be deducting through the business, and critical decisions too, like the second office, the third office, associate, when to value, private equity, how to sell to somebody. You're probably in the same boat where you see the same thing over and over again. You just become really good at it. It's and sometimes I say, it's like my daughter, she was taught how to do the Rubik's Cube. And she could do it no matter what you threw at her in less than, call it, 45 seconds. And because she practiced over and over again. It's 10, 11 children, you just see her do it over and over again, and she could do it. It's just because she saw the same thing over the 10,000 rule that we all know. And so I'm passionate about knowing my 10,000 hours and telling you what to do, how to fix that. And I'm good at the one thing, and that's it, Jill. That's it. So you ask me any like family question, I'm not really good at because I probably failed at those things.
That's awesome. I appreciate your passion. And like I said, we have had many conversations through the years, and I would agree. We are both really care a lot about the doctors and the teams and the families that we come in contact with, and really want them to be successful. And this is an area when we talk about finances, especially in a practice, I think just in general, nobody wants to talk about their money, right? Nobody wants to hear, oh, I may not be doing it right, or admit I don't know what I'm doing. And one of the things I always talk to my startup docs a lot about, and honestly, even some of my existing ones that have been going at it for a while, is now, this is the part of the business that when we think about, oh, I'm going to start a business, this is not the sexy part that we think about. This is not like, ooh, I cannot wait to get in there and do my books and to do all of this strategic planning and to think about my life insurance policies or all the things that come along with that backside. But I also feel like it's the thing that we have to do. It's that foundation that we really have to build on in our business if we want to have something more than just a practice when we're ready to retire. And when I think about that, I'm wondering if you can maybe talk to us just a little bit about what are kind of the levels we'll say that doctors go through, as maybe from that more I'm a startup to I'm 5 to 8 years in to that 10 to 15 onto retirement. Can you talk through that a little bit, and maybe what docs need to be thinking about or planning for as they're thinking through their future?
Yeah. So the first thing I want you to know as an orthodontist is your practice is the most unique of all dental practices. So you are not the same as the pros, the perio, the pedo, the GP. Your office is set up from a financial standpoint completely different than any
Mhm.
other. And it has to do with just how you're set up from a contract standpoint. And so if I have let's just say for simplicity, a ortho practice and it did a million, 5 million, 5 million, five, and it had some 60% overhead, and there was really no changes. It's just so consistent. It just would, the starts were approximately, call it 300
Mm.
at a time. That would probably be right, right?
Yep. Yep.
Million five, you'd probably see 300 stars, 300 stars, 300 stars, 300 stars. It is, so D bands would be this is it. Phase ones would all be the same. That practice is probably a little easier to look at from a financial standpoint and probably easier to probably guide. The reality is we know that's probably not common, right?
Yes.
We're going to see production. Remember, I always like to assume everyone we talk about this in the same way.
Yep.
If I go to a general dentist, I produce a crown, and that crown is $1,000. And so there's no write-off. So my adjusted production is $1,000. I collect $1,000. I
Yep.
may collect it right then, which is normal. And I may bill to the insurance. And for whatever reason, the patient left and I got to go collect that. And orthodontics is so much different because I
Mm.
produced $6,000 when that case was accepted that day, braces are on, but then I got a contract number of 5,000 and maybe I collected 1,000. So what happens in these growing practices is I'm growing. I've got to have more team to cover that patient that did the work. Now I'm an aligner case and I've got to prepay for that aligner. So I've got costs directly on people and I got costs directly now on maybe the direct cost
Mm.
aligner. And it's just sucking my cash. Okay.
Mhm.
And it just gets them in this panic mode. I feel like I'm growing. I feel like I'm successful, but where's my money? And then they take some of the money they get and then they take this money and then they buy new equipment or they buy this and they go, I'll just pay cash for it because it's sitting in my bank because I got this. And then I'll just write it off because this guy told me I just depreciate it. And that's what I do. So I'm the business owner. But then they're like, here's taxes come around. They don't have the money for taxes because they didn't realize that that's not how things work. You just can't pay for it and then expect that's just going to all wash up because I now got bank payments now for the next
Yep.
this or
10
that, or maybe
years
I
at
did pay
least.
cash.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it has to do with this, how that process of depreciation or the process of understanding what phantom income is. And they just get in this, I'm lost phase. Okay. So my challenge is for all of the audience is that you are working with the orthodontic accountant. Hey, I've got 100 orthodontics. I understand all the production contract numbers. I understand aligner cases that Invisalign's now charging $1,400 for. I got to prepay on. I get all that. You need to get all that and understand how it impacts your financial statements. I would say some of the critical decisions you got to get right is having a really good clean chart of accounts, revenue
Mm.
numbers that I should be targeting. So my team cost, for example, in ortho, once I cross about 1,700,000 of collections, production numbers, I should get that number around 18. Now, in those growing years, is that 18%? Not at all.
Yep.
Growing production years, collection years are low. My team cost is going to be much higher. So
Mhm.
having those projections and being able to see what amount of team I need for certain levels of starts, I think are critical for that young doctor to be able to see, or even the established doctor that's going through a big growth trajectory. So counting is one, being able to visualize what those projections and collections will look like. Number two, what to do with that money. What impact is it going to have to you? Now that I know I'm going to make 100, 200, 500,000, $1 million a year, then now I need to know what's my biggest issues. How do I tax project with that money? What type of pension planning should I be doing? When do I do that? What expenditures should I be thinking about? Investments I'm putting back in the practice, either from consulting or growth, whatever it may be, and really being able to visualize all of those all at once or at least throughout the year. It's so important. You're constantly just like
Yeah.
revisiting that. And I would tell you that if anything, I would challenge the listener is never be afraid to challenge what's currently in place. Accountant, lawyers, even consultants, whatever they are, and on you're a consultant, Jill,
Mm-hmm.
you have to challenge it. Does this make sense? If not, do we part ways? I've got 3,000 people in that relationship. If I don't bring value, you terminate. It's a simple relationship,
Yeah.
but that puts the pressure on us as consultants to really make sure they're getting that good return on investment. And the thing I tell people most times is they get these relationships and they feel like it's so hard to break. This accountant helped me from the startup. He was there for me. This insurance guy was my friend. This lawyer guy, this guy, that guy. And those are emotional. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
business decision
Yes.
that we're making here and about how to get to these ideally couple $1 million practices. And I think orthodontists should be able to target these $2 million runs because they can handle that on their own. Just a single doctor. Our average orthodontist is doing over 2 million. And I think that's easily attainable when you have all the right systems, the right marketing, the right locations that you help identify where those are going to be, all the right demographics. And then those are critical pieces to get those new patients in, have all the plans of how that case gets accepted, and to get their practices up to where obviously what you're trying to do is where they're financially successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Such good advice. And again, I completely agree with you, which is why I try and encourage my doctors right from the beginning. I know this isn't where you think you need to be focusing because we're thinking about all the things you just talked about. I got to hit my production goals in that first year. I got to hit my collection goals. I got to pay all these static expenses that are coming at me in this first year, this year 2, year 3. But I completely agree. And I really push out to them that they need to have a good relationship with somebody who is going to be moving along with them, because there gets to be this point. A lot of times I'll have docs, and when I give small advice, I'll say once we got things going and we're covering our expenses, we want to make sure that we've got about 3 to 6 months worth of business expenses and savings just for that. What if something happens? But it's easy to get that. And then what do you do with all the rest of it? And that's where I'm like, you have got to have somebody. You just don't want all this money just sitting there. You got to have somebody that's now advising you on what's safe to keep in a savings account. And then what do you need to be doing with it from there on? And that kind of leads me into my next question, because I do think it's hard to say, at what point do you move out of that? And let's just talk about startups or younger doctors for a minute.
For sure.
Okay, I'm just trying to pull all my expenses together and give it to somebody to help figure out how to do my taxes in my first year after I just bought this practice and bought all of this stuff. To, okay, I'm maybe starting to get some money that I'm pulling out of the practice. I'm starting to pay myself some dividends. Maybe I'm ready to go on to a small payroll now. What does that look like? And at what point do you think I agree with you, they should be working with somebody already, at least from the beginning. But sometimes there is this level up in what I would call with our accounting. We need somebody to help us get us going. And then there's that next level. Can you speak to that and maybe give us some benchmarks of, if somebody were evaluating, maybe now is that time when I need to be leveling up maybe my services?
Yes. And we've struggled, the two of us, with where that introduction happens to Cain Watters. Okay. And 40 years, we really have stuck with one service. Like, you just come in and you do this one thing, which is this personal financial planning, business consulting, certain metrics that I would say fits the Cain Watters kind of mold. We didn't talk about this pre-show, but we are actually changing that for the first time. We've got a team already built out for it, and we're going to start to do something simple as accounting only, ortho specific. We're going to do accounting. Then at what point do we need to file your tax return? We do some very minor consulting for you. And to what point do you graduate to the full Cain Watters type services? So I'll get off the Cain Watters thing for a second, but I would say this is, when you start out, you need basic accounting and you need a basic set of chart of accounts that, to me, in my opinion, I think they should be orthodontic specific. And then you've got some projections that obviously that you're trying to hit. You probably have some independent contractor or some type of W-2 income that's coming in as your part-time job. I think there's more planning opportunities as independent contractor income that's coming in from the outside versus W-2. I want to know what spousal income is as well. But I would say that from a kind of priority standpoint, you start off with basic accounting. That first year of tax return as a business owner, I would say is absolutely critical that you get that tax return right.
Yes.
The biggest mistake that I see is that the young doctor and the CPA, they take the assets they just purchased and they depreciate all of them in that first year. That doctor
Yes.
typically didn't make much money that first year, and so they're driving down taxes to literally zero, which sounds sexy that you don't pay any taxes, but the reality is you will be paying taxes. So you wrote off everything when you're at these small tax brackets. When you purchase something, these assets, they're going to be depreciated over 5, 7, or even to finish out 15 years. So I actually want to hold on to some of those expenses, preparing for you're going to be successful, preparing for you're going to be in these higher tax brackets. So to go back to your question, step one, accounting, basic. You should budget, call it $600-700 a month for really good accounting. You can certainly get it for less. In general, it's not going to be orthodontic specific. Budget that. Second is have someone that is going to be able to know taxes that can file your tax return. Again, dental related, and know that you're a growing business based on your production, growing based on your contracts, knowing that you've got spousal income, knowing that you've got independent contractor income, can be able to see that and visualize what your future years look like. The tax return and then tax planning becomes the second tiers of where you need. And typically these are, got the practice up and going. It's a 400 kind of production first year, 600, whatever it is on the second year, whatever these things are, and to visualize how much you make and come up with kind of what your needs are. And then eventually, I think you graduate to a tier where you're doing, I don't know, let's just say $1 million on the production standpoint, call it. Maybe it's $1 million on the collection standpoint. So probably your production is probably $1.3 million and trailing collections are $1 million. Hopefully you have an overhead somewhere in that, at that stage, maybe 60%, you're maybe making around 400 between doctor and spousal income. That's where it triggers, I think, more some complex planning. And those complex planning decisions are now pension plans, other equipment changes and upgrades, additional marketing efforts, usually other investments outside of the practice. It could be spousal income, changes, this and that. Those start to become a little more investments as well. Those start to become a little more complicated. And that's where I think the different level of advice is needed. So I've got actually a tiered structure. You're broke. And for an associate, I got that one. I barely started a practice. I need this. I'm making a little money to where, I'm printing money. I want to get you to printing money, and you have, I call it RPP, rich people problems. I like rich people problems, and rich people problems, usually I want two things, taxes and time. I'm trying to free up your time and help you with that, and definitely trying to free up your tax money that you're giving to the federal and state governments, and then building wealth. So there's a nice little balance there, because the building wealth, tax and time, those all go together, because in the end, building wealth is essentially how we're going to, quote unquote, free up our time, which is going to be the most important thing in this game.
Yeah. Oh, that's such good advice. And exactly, you broke it down really nicely, because it is hard to quantify what we're looking for and where you need to be. And just the reality of it is, a lot of times our younger docs just aren't there yet, but I don't want them to lose sight of where they're going. And I think just having that benchmark, if I'm around collectively 400,000 that I'm bringing in, or I'm producing million 5, something like that, I'm probably going to be close. So it's at least worth a reach out to say, hey, is it now time for me to really start looking into maybe graduating my services?
And look, orthodontic analogy, what we offer, just like orthodontics would, let's just do a free exam. Let's just see where your 20 teeth are and see where the first set of molars are coming in. If you're a phase 1 candidate or not, let's take a peek. And then that could be the startup person. That could be the 500 collection production person. And it could be second set of molars or third set of molars are in where it's more complicated. So my Rubik's Cube is, I love to educate, motivate, and teach. You give me 30 minutes and you're investing your time, by gathering information, your production reports, your first year tax returns, your this, your that. You send that to me. I'm going to spend 30 minutes prepping for a call. I'm coming out hard of the gate. I'm telling you exactly what I would do differently, how to challenge your advisor, tax deductions you missed. My offer back to your listeners is that you let me into your mouth and see where those molars are. I'm gonna give you a straight, pretty smile when you're all done, girl. We're gonna make all those teeth just nice and hit perfect.
Perfect. I love it. We're going for that class 1 bite. Class 1 bite.
Look at that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. I got this game 20 years ago, and my general dentist said, man, you're going to be working for Cain Watters. Those dentists, they're vicious. They're going to grab your chin. They're going to start telling you they can fix this and that. You need to get orthodontics now, buddy. And your bites off, you're crushing on your teeth. So I was like, I got to get my smile fixed before all these dentists start looking at me. Yeah.
I always joke, you're sitting at a table of orthodontists or dentists when nobody's afraid to say, hey, let me see what, in the middle of a bite, let me see that. What is going on there? I'm like, we don't see the food. All that we can see is the teeth.
Yeah,
So,
my upper and lower linguals are in, girl. Okay, they're in. They're tight, just inspected by my GPs. My protection is there.
I love it. So let's talk a little bit about trends. Because I think we're always wanting to know what's coming at us. What should we be aware of? We can never, I think every year there's something new that we need to be thinking about or doing. So what are you seeing right now in trends in regard to where we're going, maybe financial planning, anything that you think we should be aware of?
So talk about orthodontic trend. I don't have the exact numbers. It's just when you go to these meetings constantly, or you're talking to orthodontists constantly, you start just to hear it more and more. And I took a little pulse with my orthodontic advisors here, just hey, I'm talking to Jill today, and definitely seeing more of this. So one of the trends that we're seeing more of is seeing a lower down payment, with our start. So that number back in the day, several thousand, 2,500, 1,200, 1,000, it was 800. Now it's dipping into the averages in the sevens. But what's interesting now is just because of corporate and because of the number of private equity acquisitions in orthodontics that have happened, you're seeing a little bit more of aggressive approach from this kind of $99 down payment, $199 down payment, and $200 going forward just to get the case accepted. So a trend that we are seeing is this almost non-existent down payment. And then the treatment time, obviously, with technology has completely changed the game. So now all of a sudden we're able to shorten the game and shorten the visits, which is awesome. But what we're also seeing is you can't just take a $200 payment and a $6,000 balance on a $6,200 case divided by now the 9 visits and expect someone to be dropping that kind of money to get out of braces in 9 months. So the trend is you're starting to see the high case acceptance, the low down payment that's happening, but actually a true accounts receivable that's being carried. So an accounts receivable, and sometimes consultants mess this up and orthodontists mess this up, an accounts receivable, in our opinion, from a definition standpoint, it is an amount due for services that's already been rendered. So in this case, the braces are off. Okay, so they've only paid you $200 down payment, and maybe they paid 20 months, so call it $4,000 total, and your balance, they're out of braces. And so we're seeing this accounts receivable actually carry as well. So that's one thing that we've certainly started to see, and I've got some examples of some really successful practices that are doing that. And the most interesting part about that trend is the big $1 million question is, why would they pay, or do they still pay? Because they're out. The answer is they pay. I mean, you're seeing this number still 97%. This is a good number to have. Then you basically take the 3% of what doesn't get paid, and guess what you do? On those particular cases, you add it back into your fee increase, knowing that it's going to happen. Walmart increases their fees knowing they have X amount of shoplifters. It's a process that you can do, but it really improves your case acceptance, and it allows you to be very competitive. And that's certainly a difference in a mindset that I think orthodontics has always been in. And so it's interesting to see that work, and it's interesting to see where that will go. But so far, the clients that we're seeing kind of experience that, you've seen very good results. The trend that's been continuing here for the last several, I don't know, 10 years is probably a strong number. 5 years with absolute just complete strength is the continued private equity, just aggressive approach towards these private practices that are for sale, the orthodontic practices that certainly meet the metrics of what they're looking for. That trend has not slowed down. And if anything, slowed down. I think I said slowed down. That trend has not slowed down. Some of our private equity multiples have started to dip because of interest rates. So that's a recent trend in the last year, as our listeners are listening as of today. So it's this last full year starting at the beginning of 23 when interest rates started to increase to where they are today. Pretty much now what we're seeing is we thought there's going to be this major dip in interest rates. Now we're like, maybe not. So the private equity companies all came to a halt because now for them they used to borrow money like 3%. Now they're borrowing money like 9%. So the money is really hard to get. And then, so if they're borrowing money at high rates, now all of a sudden these businesses are looking at don't look as attractive because they're not going to get a bigger return on the capital for their investors. So now they're not giving the same multiples. And so you saw a little bit of slowdown and a little bit of maybe lower numbers from a valuation standpoint. Total enterprise value come down a little bit lower in orthodontics, but not much. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's still a good space if you got this multi-million-dollar practice and you're considering what my thing is worth. It's an interesting exercise to the short version is if you're going to think about it, have a financial advisor go walk you through this, somebody who's gone through this exercise hundreds of times. I think I'm a little biased because we've done that. But high level, you got to think of it this way. They're going to give you a bunch of money today. You're committing to work back for at least 5 years, if not more, at a lesser pay. And you're going to be break even somewhere between 5 and 6 years that you gave it. You just got pulled the money off the table, got some money up front, work back less, and basically you're investing back in that company if it's a Smile Doctors or SOP or MB2 or one of the big players out there that work in ortho. So from a trend standpoint, that's definitely something that we see a pulse on this thing. I know you do as well and seeing what's happening. I actually, just for my knowledge and for your listeners, what about you? What trends are you seeing?
I definitely would agree with you when it comes to practice transitions. What I'm seeing is we definitely, I feel like there's always this mark of, I have docs because I not only do startups, but I have existings too. And they're like, hey, Jill, I think I'm getting to a point where I'm ready to sell. And it really is the difference of, I feel like if you are almost million 8 and above, you are probably, it's going to be hard pressed to find a private person that's going to buy the practice. So you really are leaning a little bit more into the equity space. I think with some of the OSOs and DSOs evaluating where I'm seeing if I've got a doc that's in that million-ish, 1.5 million or lower, we can still usually find a lot of doctors that will buy or are looking to buy. So I think in that regard to trends, that's something I am seeing a lot with doctors. I see that on both sides. Now, in regard to just in general, where I see our industry is going, and you were speaking to it a little bit, just in how we're acquiring patients and how we've adjusted our down payments and our monthly payments and not attributing payments to length of treatment, but instead a way or a modality for patients to be able to afford treatment. I definitely am seeing big changes there. And I think OrthoFi did a good job really highlighting that for us in our industry and giving us the data there. But I also am really seeing this shift towards outsourcing and this movement from where we used to look at our P&Ls and we would have all of these, you and I have been in this for a while now, and we would see all of these employee and this overhead on the employee side. And now what we're doing is we're seeing more and more third parties coming in. And I look at it as refining and defining our practices and really making them lean, mean machines where instead of relying heavily on employees and bodies. I call it, I'm sure you've read the book, Who Not How, where we spent so much time working on the processes with all of these people in our practices. Now we're really going, the who may not be a physical person in our practice anymore. That who may be a third party outsourced company that can just really dial it in for amazing new patient phone calls, whether it's nights, weekends, text, email, whatever that is, to maybe a company that is dialed in on just doing our patient financials and making sure that our AR, as you've been talking about, our percentage stays in that 3 to 5% healthy range for the total practice. So I would say for me, those are some of the bigger trends, is really identifying that. And then doctors, my last one that I would say is, we are really moving towards just customized treatment within our practices, where it isn't just about braces or braces and aligners. Now it's about a custom treatment plan, which could be a custom bracket, a custom aligner treatment, a custom phase 1 bracket, that we're really meeting the needs of the patients, so that when they're coming in, and no matter what they're asking for, we're able to deliver it, and we're managing that cost. We still have to be aware of that. And that's where you guys come in so much. We still have to be aware of not turning ourselves upside down. But if we can manage that shared chair time with all of these different things, and it is not just with aligners, we're seeing very successful practices with a lot of, I'll call them, tools in their toolbox.
Add too, like you talked about the people and the outsourcing. I'm going to add to that, because what you just talked about is technology. And the same thing for us is technology basically is the idea and concept behind it is, if you're investing in tech, it should free up your time.
Yeah.
So theoretically, if you're going to do an aligner case, it should free up your time. This is a chair appointment time. This is how many times they come and visit. That's technology. And so I was asked to speak to AAO on this topic on technology. I'm like, I'm not a technology guy. I was like, oh, you're a finance guy, right? Figure it out. In the end, what we found is there's certain goals I have for my team costs, period. And if somebody's going to sell you on that technology is supposed to free up your time, and your lab costs are going up and your team costs are not lower, that technology is not working.
Exactly.
So you have to have some gauges there. And now if you show me that you've got a 14% team cost, and then you've got a lab bill at 13, I have no issues with that. You tell me you're working 3 days a week. You tell me you're running a $2.3 million practice, and the majority of it's liner with 14% team costs. You have tax problems, right? We probably are talking about the $1 million you make. We're probably talking about the private equity enterprise value of this. We're probably talking about a lot of other things, and not your team cost.
Yep.
Because you have solved the technology team issue because you're managing it. And so definitely managing by numbers and looking at it and seeing all these things make sense. If the team cost is out of line, where is it out of line? Specifically, where is your team out? And then now what are other areas? As a consultant, you're a consultant. I have other clients that are doing the following. This works. So you're investing in this process or this team. It's either overseas or this company that works at night and it's how they get paid and whatever it is, or technology. And that's how you're going to get a better return on investment. And that's what I always love about anybody who specializes in what they do. It's just they specialize.
Yep.
I always talk about the Mayo Clinic. If you go to the Mayo Clinic, you're going to get a specialist. And they're going to look and they're going to tell you everything about you. And there's value by having that person tell you specifically what your problem is with certainty. And I love it, because to me, it's like a math game with one answer, and I like to get the right answer.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And one other thing you said is like the $1.8 million. I agree with you. Those practices, like what practices for sale, because you're in that space, we talk to a lot of both doctors. Two doctors are the young one and the old one, right?
Yep.
That's who we're a lot that are coming to us.
I say both shoulders. We work on both shoulders.
Absolutely. So the 1.8 guy, I think it's tipping to the point to where, depending on their overhead, it could be a private equity sale, but they may not want to work the 5 years. Okay. But I do think that if I had a 1.8 practice, I do think that the young buyer would want to buy it. I think it's going to make sense to them at the bank. And I do see that trend more from the $1.5 million practice or less. That's the one that's going to become more available to my young buyers that are buying private practices.
Yep.
Because it doesn't make sense typically for the $1.5 million kind of orthodontic practice with a call it a 60% overhead to sell to private equity. So they thought they were going to do that, but then they're not. They don't want to commit to the time, the value, and the money. It's not that exciting. So that's the ones we're right now that are basically popping on the market. And that is definitely a trend that I know both of us are seeing. And it's interesting that kind of private equity is making a lot of these decisions. Private equity buying these practices, nothing's available. And now we see the trend more on startups because I want to be in this area, me and this pediatric dentist, me and my husband, me and my spouse. I just want to be here. Nothing's available. And I've been doing this 5 or 6 years and I'm ready to pull the trigger. They hire somebody like you, demographics. So it's interesting how one kind of key giant thing out here is making decisions that impacts the entire profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I know you've been speaking roundly about valuations and all of that, but any other thoughts that you have that we should be aware of, maybe going in to these next couple of years in regard to just maybe how things are being looked at or evaluated from a private practice standpoint to somebody maybe that is looking for more of the private equity space? By now, we all know I talk to a lot of doctors and give advice to practices in every stage of their life cycle. And one question my docs ask all the time is, who do you recommend for marketing to attract more new patients from the internet? My answer? Easy. I have been recommending Mary Kay Miller and her team at Kaleidoscope for the better part of a decade. Why? They are thorough, professional, and transparent. Kaleidoscope Digital Marketing is who you want to talk to because they understand how to market in the orthodontic world and they offer tools that are affordable and easy to use. I'm telling you, if you're looking to step up your digital presence, Kaleidoscope should be your first call. Go to contactkl.com to request your free digital marketing consultation. That's contactkl.com. We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy. And technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch.
Yeah, so talk very quickly on just private practice sales and then private equity sales. And interesting, we just had a dinner with Shannon and Doug with Benson and Koppel.
Yes, love it.
We are not competitors. We are close friends. We both do the same work. I think they do an amazing job on the orthodontic kind of valuation services. We do the same, but I love them and I always respect their thoughts and opinions about things. And I like how we see eye to eye. That's so important because I think we're both pretty well known in the space of this kind of valuation, orthodontic kind of knowledge person. It's kind of the two major players.
Yep.
And we see eye to eye on this. So high level, private practice buyer is just doctor to doctor. Okay. And for simplicity, it's $1 million practice. For simplicity, it's got a 55% overhead. Simplicity is not some rare, like high Medicaid, rare state thing. It's just a nice cooking along practice. That $1 million practice is probably going to value between 90 to 110%. Means it's going to value between 900 to $1.1 million. $1.5 million, $1.4 million to probably $1.6 million. When would I pay more for a practice than the private practice sell doctor? When it makes more money. If you show me a private practice that nets like 60% with a 40% overhead, 60% net, I'm willing to pay more. Yeah, I get excited. You want 100% of collections? Okay, you can have it. Even when I value the business, I'm like, oh, wow, this thing's kind of valuing like 110, 120%. It's almost like pushing the limits. And typically the limit's going to be the bank. The bank doesn't want to lend that much money because it's not like a history and industry standard that we're doing that. But they do understand orthodontics is a little bit unique. So from that perspective, I gave you the example of kind of the $1 million, $1.5 million kind of practice, somewhere between 85, 90, 110% of collections. I think that's all reasonable and something that you can expect. Now, we go up to these $2 million practices. There's something called the total enterprise value, and these valuations are going to be much, much higher. That's the ones with the private equities. There's, again, the Smile Doctors to SOPs, MB2, three major players as far as private equity kind of investors in this space. And so I'm going to give you a super high level, your listeners, a high level understanding of that. I have a $2 million business. It's got a 50% overhead. That just means that the doctors makes basically $1 million before they pay themselves. I've removed interest, depreciation, the kids off the payroll, the spouse, the 401k profit sharing plan, the travel, the meal, the Costco, everything, and clean the nice financials of how much does this guy or gal make? In this case, $1 million. So you basically, the profit of the business is $1 million, and then they establish what's called a reasonable work back for the doctor. As an orthodontist, they'll give you like $300,000, $1,500 per diem, 200 working days a year, $300,000. So your EBITDA in that example is $700,000. If they were to pay you a multiple of 8, you would have a total enterprise value of $5.6 million.
Wow.
Now your $2 million business is worth over 5. Now you're not going to get that money up front. You're going to get like 70% up front. So you're going to get like $4 million up front. You're going to take a pay cut for the next 5 years, and that pay cut's going to be down to $300,000. So it's just, I got money up front, and for the next 5 years, I basically took a $700,000 pay cut. $700,000 pay cut in that example over 5 years is $3.5 million. You may be $4 million up front, but yet I still own all the business if I didn't sell. So you have to understand that this is a financial planning investment decision of, does this make sense for me and for my practice at this particular time? And that's the trend that we're seeing a lot of these very high-end practices end up doing, because the number is so unreal to them that they just want to take the money off the table. To some degree, I can understand where they're coming from. I'm not saying it's the best decision for everybody, but I can understand where they're coming from.
Well, that was great. And thank you for really breaking that down, because I do feel like a lot of times you hear EBITDA thrown around and everybody does a little, or talks about it a little differently. And it sounds, it's just hard to put your brain around. So I think your explanation is just really simple. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, okay, I get it now. I get what they're talking about. So nice job with that. Would I expect anything less? No. So as we start to wrap up here, and I know you and I could just go on and on. This is definitely our passion and where we love to live. Could you give us maybe 3? Did we just cut out there?
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
Okay, good. All right, we'll start it again.
Yeah.
Bye. All right. So as we start to wrap up here, one of the things I would love you to do for us is give us 3 pieces of advice. I think you've given us like 20 already in this episode, but if you had 3 more gems that you could share with us, especially for, let's just go with the younger docs that may be listening, maybe on where and how they should get ready to start planning for their financial future. And I know we talked on that a little bit, but if you have any additional thoughts on that.
Own first. I can't say it. If you're a resident, listen, I ideally need you to own by the 3rd year you've been out of practice. If you're already out and you've been out 3 years, TikTok. So market yourself to practices all around the country where you want to live, and create a relationship, and to understand that you don't just look on your phone for practices that are for sale, because probably a broker or somebody's already tackled them. You got to market directly. So I'd say understand your why, which is to own, / go solve that why and create a relationship with somebody to own something.
Yes.
That could be after you're exhausted, you're going to do a start. I'm on this, and I will tell you right now, and I will tell anybody who calls me, that if you're going to do a startup, you're a fool not to hire you, Jill. And we're not, there's no money going back and forth here, listeners.
No.
There's just love. Okay. Just love. She does a good job at this, and I will tell you that. So I think that the owning is number 1. Number 2, time is real. Time is going to hit you fast. Life goes really quickly. You have to always learn how to plan first. Planning, to me, is projections. Planning to me is always saving 20% of what you make. When I say 20% of what you make, it's typically when you're an owner and typically when you're making around 300,000 or more. If you're a resident and you're making $5,000, I don't want you to save anything. Just get some cash and go buy a business or start a business.
Yes.
So have that plan. Kind of number two, understand that your personal plan, retirement planning, and tax planning are like your critical piece. And three is always surround yourself with best of class people. Do all of your due diligence on those people. Like I said earlier, be willing to fire those people at any point. Do a lot of the due diligence, like calling their client references. And when Facebook and when your friends and social media or anybody is saying that you can't do it, what I would tell you is people will tell you that, I don't know, it's like playing with a tennis player. If you play with somebody who's never played, you're not going to improve your game. But if you play with a bunch of professional tennis players, you're going to get better.
Yeah.
My challenge would be as a young person, surround yourself with people that are just who you want to be. $2-3 million practices that 3-4 days a week that think it looks like they got their life together. They're excited and fun. And that's who you want to hang with. And then you want to write down and visit, what mistakes did you have? And take that and go do the interview 20 plus times. You're going to see the common thing that they have. Take all those 10, 12 things, and that's your recipe. And that's what you need to go do. And don't try to do a lot of this on your own. I had a guy tell me, it's so super funny. Charles, I've looked at what you do. I feel like I can get a lot of all the tax advice on Instagram. There's 20 things you can run through your business. I already know what those are. What else are you going to tell me to do? Augusta rule, I get it. My kids, I get it. Pension plan, I get it. And I just smiled. I was like, yeah, I think you get it. I wish you the best. Because if you think 14,000 pages of tax code or whatever the number is, and it's just 6 little cute little things and there's no impact of this or that, good job, buddy. You are good for you and you only, because it's complicated. My life is complicated. Your life is complicated. And I would just say hire the specialist. It's the best in class, and to listen and trust them once you make that type of decision.
Yeah.
So.
Great advice. If somebody wants to get a hold of you guys, they want to just take you up on that complimentary consultation, what is the best way that they should do that?
Yeah, even if I'm going to look at buying a practice, or you're currently a practice owner or a startup or even a resident. So the main website, cainwatters.com, and then just hit the info at Cain Watters. That actually comes to me and my team. And then from there, we typically will have a short phone call with you, grab a few things from you, and then that's when the call gets set up with me, and I'll do the personal interview to see what I can do to help you. My commitment is I'm not going to sell you anything. My commitment is I'm going to push you and tell you what I think you need to do and steer you in the right direction. And hopefully that maybe comes back around to me at one point in the future, or maybe help you right then. Don't know.
Yep. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you again for being,
that's awesome.
Giving us such a good information. Until next time, see ya. Hey.